So we are having just a little bit of issues with our headset mics today. You've probably noticed a few cutouts occasionally on that. If we continue to have any issues with that, we'll make an adjustment as we go. Hopefully for those on Zoom, it hasn't been too distracting or difficult for you to hear. Paul wrote to two of the young pastors a list of qualifications. He sent those to Timothy and Titus about the qualities that an individual man that was being considered for the role of an elder, that he had to have certain qualities. Many of these things on the list make sense to us. Things like, yeah, of course, they need to be faithful to one wife. Yeah, it makes total sense that they need to have a good reputation, that they shouldn't be a heavy drinker, they shouldn't be greedy for money or violent or any of those type of things. That makes sense to us. But I also think there's one on the list, or there may be even more than one, but there's one that stood out to me that I didn't think was maybe as intuitive as others. One that I initially found surprising. And in fact, if you go out and you would Google this topic, or not Google it, but go onto our website at ucg.org and put into the sermon search engine, normally if you do that on a given topic, you'll get hundreds of messages, sermons that are pre-recorded on any given message. On this particular topic, you would go out and you would find only 12 messages, and one of them's even a sermonette, a couple of them split sermons. So we don't have a lot of messages even recorded on this topic out on the website. And today we're going to dive into this topic. The topic is the qualification of hospitality. The qualification of hospitality. It's found on both of the lists at both Timothy and Titus. And it might not be something that we're like, oh, this is one of those big, super important topics that we need to talk about. But it was such a big, important topic that, again, Paul listed it here as a requirement that elders must have this quality in order to be qualified to be an elder. So let's start there. Let's go to 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2. 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2. And it starts with, a bishop must be. I don't want us to read over this too quickly, because this isn't a list of things that would be nice if the elders had. Like to haves. It'd be nice if the elders had these qualities. It says they must be. They must have these. And in the Greek, this word actually comes from a word which means to bind. This is a binding requirement for elders, meaning if they don't have this quality, they are not allowed to be ordained as an elder in the church. And this quality, as well as the other qualities listed here, they're later found not to have these qualities. They would become disqualified for serving in that role. It's that big of a deal. So it was a little bit surprising initially to me to go, one of the binding qualities that an elder absolutely must have is hospitality. And it goes obviously beyond just elders, of course. This list is a quality that all elders should have, but it's because all of us as Christians should have these qualities. This is not just a list of qualities for elders, and we'll see that. It'll be included in other places in the Bible that we're going to look at. But this is something all of us should be striving to possess, this quality. The word translated hospitality in the Greek, I would like you to write this in your notes if you're taking notes. And if not, I guess you're just going to have to commit it to memory. But it's the Greek word philoxenos, and I'm going to spell it for you. It's Philo, and that's kind of the first word. I'm going to, as I spell it, kind of note that that's the first word. Philo, and it's combined with the ending, which is Xenos, Xenos. So philoxenos, and we're going to go into each of those words. This is not a word that's used very much in the Bible. Only 3 times is this word found, and one of them's in that list in Timothy, and the others, another's in the list in Titus. So that's 2 of 3. So we don't get a lot of context for that word. So, but thankfully, each of the words that form this are used many more times and are very clear what they mean. So we're going to start with the first part of that philos, Philo, and they actually add an S to the end of it when you break it apart. But Philos, philos. It's found 29 times in the Bible, and it's always translated into King James Version the exact same way, all 29 times. So that makes it helpful. And it simply means friend. Friend. Jesus Christ would use this in his own teachings. I'll reference this for you. I'm going to read it to you. We won't take the time to have everybody turn there. But in John 15, 13 through 15, and we read this at Passover often, he uses it 3 times in 3 straight verses. You'll know these verses. I'll read them to you. John 15, 13 through 15. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for their friend, right? This word friend is this philos. Verse 14, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things I've heard from my Father I've made known to you. So I think that part's fairly simple, right? We understand this word means friend. All right. What about the second part? The xenos, Z-E-N-O-S. I said Z, X, X-E-N-O-S, xenos. It's used 14 times in the Bible, and it's almost always translated stranger. And it means stranger or foreigner. This word is the word that you'll be familiar with that Christ used in Matthew 25, verse 35, when he said, I was a stranger and you took me in. Or he also says there, I was a stranger and you didn't take me in, right? And if you did this to the least of these, my brother. But this word for stranger that he uses here, it's this word, xenos, X-E-N-O-S. So when we push these 2 words together and get the whole philoxenos, it means friendly strangers. It's that simple. Friendly to strangers. And that's the word that is translated in our Bible as, what's the title of my sermon? Hospitality. Some things they shoot out of the head, and where'd they go? All right, so this is friendly to strangers, or what we would call hospitality. Now, some versions of the Bible actually will go ahead and translate this, seeing the combination of words here. For example, if you would look at the literal standard version, it says a friend of strangers is how it translates this, and that's a literal standard, literal translation. The contemporary English version says friendly to strangers. Basic Bible and Basic English says he opens his house freely to guests. And the easy to read version says he must be ready to help people by welcoming them into his home. So a few different ways that people get at that same general point, that it's friendly to strangers, but we're going to see that it also contains this meaning of in your home. And we're going to get into that as we move through. But in its simplicity, it's simply a friendliness towards strangers. Is this a quality that you and I have? For me, it has to be, or I'm not qualified to be in the position that I have. That's what the Bible says. But it's for all of us. We better all have it, because this is a quality that God expects all of us to be developing. This word, philoxenos, is found in other places besides, again, the list in Timothy and Titus. And we're going to go to that last one later. But first, let's look at an almost identical word found in Romans 12. Go with me to Romans 12, please. As we move through this, we're going to keep adding just a slight extra word here and there that helps us to better understand what the instructions of the Bible are around this. Here in Romans 12, Paul's writing a letter to the church in Rome. I want us to first kind of just look at the overall theme of this whole chapter. When we step back and we look at the theme, the major theme of Romans 12 is that each of us are called to be living sacrifices, right? We've been called to this way of life. We've died with Jesus Christ through baptism, and we're supposed to be somebody who now lives our life in a completely different way, being a living sacrifice for Jesus Christ now. That means we're giving of our time. We give of our resources. We're willing to give something of ourselves, sacrifice, in order to be a Christian. And then when we get down to kind of verse 9, above my Bible here that I'm looking at, it says, behave like a Christian. I don't know if that's what yours says. Both of my New King James versions said that, behave like a Christian. And so then it begins to list a number of qualities and characteristics that true Christians should have. And again, not talking about now elders or only, someone being considered for elder, but anyone who has the Christian name, and not just name only, but, they're the real deal. This is what they should be. Well, when we get down to verse 13 here of Romans 12, notice it says, given to hospitality. This word here for hospitality is almost the same word. This one is philonesia. I'll spell it for you just for your notes. Philo, just like the beginning of the other one. It ends in nexia. Nexia. Now, this is simply the noun form of the exact word we just looked at. The other was the adjective. This is the noun form. So they have that same meaning, other than one being a noun, one being a descriptive word of the noun. All right. And again, if you look at Strong's or Thayer's, it would tell you this word came from the other word. So they're joined together. If it's essentially the same word, why am I bringing it up again? Well, there's something else that here Paul adds that he didn't before, and that's the beginning of this given to that is added here. Actually, there's two things I want us to draw out here. Just again, one, that it's for all Christians, not just elders again. And then second is this given to part that he adds to the beginning. This word, when we look at it in the Greek, given to something, can be good or bad. For example, even in our own English language, we often will say someone's given to alcohol. And what do we mean by that? Well, they're strongly drawn to it, right? To a point that it's a problem in their life. And we could also say someone's given to service. They're someone who their heart desires to serve other people, and they're given to that. So we can mean it even in our English way, both as a positive or negative, and it's the exact same way in the Greek here that we're looking at. Today, we're looking at it from the positive lens. And when we look at it, well, whether you meant it in positive or negative, it means to run swiftly towards something. So in the Greek, the definition means to run swiftly towards something. In the Bible, when we would look at like all the things we're told to give ourselves to or to run swiftly toward, it's a list that probably wouldn't be surprising to us. Things like we're told to swiftly run toward peace, toward things that make for peace. We're told to swiftly run toward agape love for other people. We're told to swiftly run toward the finish line of our calling. We're told to swiftly run for righteousness and holiness. Now that makes sense to us, right? All those things seem like big things to run toward. Peace, love, righteousness, holiness, the finish line of our calling. And then another one is hospitality, or this word here. It's something that we're supposed to swiftly be running toward as a group. Would our Savior look at our life right now and say, that's someone who swiftly runs toward hospitality? That's what we're looking to develop. Would he be able to say that about us? Are we friendly towards strangers? Is that something that, we're quick to want to invite them into our home, to provide a meal for them, those type of things that are a part of this word. Let's go to now Hebrews 13 and verse 2. Hebrews 13 and verse 2. This is the only other place this noun form of this word is found. So it's only the adjective was found 3 times in the Bible. The noun form's only found twice. So these aren't words that we find all over the Bible or all over the New Testament. This is the only other place. And again, some extra details are added here. Here, the author of Hebrews adds a couple new facets. Hebrews 13 and verse 2 says, "Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels." I thought that was interesting. Wow. Here, the New King James translates it this time, entertain strangers, but it's the same word for hospitality. So you could, sub those 2 things out. I like hospitality or, friendly towards strangers better than entertaining. And I'll come back to why sometimes we look at those 2 words slightly different in their meaning. But again, it's the word for hospitality here. First of all, it tells us here not to forget. Not to forget. This Greek word means to let something slip from your mind, what you would think of as forgetting. I forgot to stop and get a loaf of bread. I let it slip from my mind. Like I told my wife, that's kind of its meaning, but it also contains the meaning to neglect. So it's something that we know to do, but we don't find it that important, that big of a priority in our life. And so we neglect it. And in that sense, we forget it. So we just don't end up doing it. And I think all of us would be honest and say, in the busyness of this world, there's a number of things that are easy to let get neglected, to let slip from our mind, to not give the priority so that, a week goes by, months go by, maybe even a whole year goes by and not had anybody, hosted in our home for a meal or practiced this hospitality. And Paul tells us here, don't forget, don't let this happen. Don't let it be something you neglect. And then he tells us that I think is really fascinating. He says, some, without even knowing they did it, have brought someone into their home that was angel, angelos, the Greek word there that for messenger or angel. They've entertained angels. And we'll talk about this word entertain. It, when we talked about that ending of the word xenos, Xenos, this word is a variation of that word, and it means to receive a guest. So all this is, connected together. It means to receive a guest. So someone unwittingly received a guest into their home that was an angel. Now, this word for entertaining, like I just said, it means receive a guest. It doesn't mean they juggled for them. It didn't mean they put on a show for them. It means that they simply had them into the home. They didn't necessarily break out the fine china, get out their best dishes or glasses or, food or wine or anything else that's not contained in this word. It simply means they opened their home to someone else. Could this happen? I asked myself this question. Could this happen today? Could somebody ever walk through the door? None of us know. And because we run to hospitality, somebody in the congregation invites that person back to their home to have some meal that they have in our crock pot at home, getting ready for when they get home. They have somebody over, they spend a lovely evening, they talk about, where they came from and how they came into the church, and unwittingly, unknowingly entertains an angel. I believe it could be possible. Now, do I think this happens all the time? Probably not. But the New Testament says this happened. It could still happen even today. But it only could happen if people were willing to say, I don't know that person, but it doesn't matter that I don't know them. They're here at church, they're in our family, and I'm going to have them over to my house. This word for lodging a guest or receiving a guest, it's found 10 different places in the New Testament here. And every time it's talked about where, somebody, whether it's Peter gets lodged at Simon the tanner's place, or a number of different, but it's about lodging, it's giving them a place, receiving a guest in that type of way. We're going to look at an example in 1 Timothy 5:10. 1 Timothy 5:10, if you'll turn there with me. Now, here in 1 Timothy 5:10 is not something we look at a whole lot as a church. It is a list of qualities that a widow who is needing to be have financial assistance provided to a widow of the church has to meet a certain number of criteria to even be able to receive church assistance. Here it says, taking a number. But, some of those things are, she had to be over 60 years old, had to only have, a single husband. And there's a number of other things on the list. But what was interesting to me is this word that she had to lodge strangers. It was one of the qualities that a widow couldn't be provided for it by the church if one of the things she didn't do was be hospitable, didn't open her home and lodge strangers. I thought that was fascinating. Are we starting to understand how important this is to God? I mean, he has it in the list of qualities that an elder has to have, or he cannot serve in that role. We saw it as a quality of all Christians to be a true, genuine Christian, to be the real deal. And we see it now. If this widow doesn't have it, she can't receive church assistance. It's a pretty big deal. We have to be people who are looking out for other individuals, who are friendly to guests, opening our home, offering a meal, putting ourselves out there, giving of our time, our resources, our comforts, our privacy, you name it. What is hospitality? What kind of things fall into it? This kind of hospitality, these words in the Greek all indicate something that is happening in our home. So this is not the same of us going out to a restaurant together. It's that while that might be a good thing to take somebody out for a meal, this is about taking someone into your space. You have them back into your setting, your space. You provide for their needs. Again, it involves us being a living sacrifice. We all have busy lives. So we set down something we're busy with to say, I'm going to make sure I look out for this person I don't even know, or know well at least, and I'm going to make sure their needs are met. I'm going to make sure they have a roof over their head tonight. I'm going to make sure they have something in their bellies. And I think that's where sometimes we get too caught up in maybe the idea of entertainment. And I think I have this actually later in my notes, but hospitality is different in entertainment, where entertainment's about, maybe the show that you're going to do, or the fine things you break out. You're entertaining. It's a different kind of focus. This isn't about needing to have fancy food or giving somebody, some really spectacular meal. It's not about that. It's about the person. It's about the relationship and developing that relationship. We all have limited amounts of money. We don't have endless resources. This isn't talking about needing to spend lots of money on this individual. This can be a very simple amount of food into the belly. It can be done on paper plates and plastic. Did I cut out? Okay, I'm back. It's about bringing somebody into our space, our privacy. It's a real concrete and tangible example of being a living sacrifice as Christians. Hospitality is also not hanging out with our friends. Now, is hanging out with our friends a bad thing to do? No, not at all. That's a great thing to do. But remember, this word is formed with friendly to strangers. Well, are our friends strangers? No. So hospitality, in the definition of the words itself, is not about just having the people over that we already know well and are comfortable with. Again, that's not a bad thing to do, but we're already comfortable with them. We already know those individuals. Are we going to change out? Okay, we're going to change out. So we're going to pause here and get a different mic. That means I'm going to have to stay behind the mic. Test, test, test. Jose, who broke my mic? Jose gets more things broken than anybody I know. All right, we're back on. Sorry about that on Zoom. Hopefully this is a little better for you. So again, hanging out with friends, that's great. We should do that. But if we're wanting to develop this quality of hospitality, it's about extending ourselves outside of our comfort zone and getting to know more of the children of God. I've already talked about that hospitality is not entertaining. When sometimes it can have aspects of entertaining. That's not, don't have to be separated. When we, our kids were really little, we would have people over to our home, and the kids would almost always go off halfway through the meal and come up with some sort of skit or play or something, song, Bible skit, and at some point come out and be really excited to drag us all away from the dinner table out to the living room to be able to put on some sort of show for us. So in those cases, the person got a dinner and a show, and it was great. You know, the kids were really cute, and we appreciated their desire to, do something that they thought others would enjoy. And that was fine. But again, hospitality isn't needing to have fancy plates, fancy food, fancy dishes, fancy anything. It's not about having a home that is in perfect condition for having people over. It's not about having a nice home. It's not, you can be hospitable in any type of dwelling, of an apartment, a trailer, or a home. I've gone to people's house and I've sat in their driveway and talked for 2 hours and had a lovely time. You can have a picnic in your yard if you don't want to have somebody in your home and still be hospitable. Take this off. Okay, it looks goofy to both have this and that. So I get a lot of feedback, and I appreciate that. Thanks. So, we can be hospitable anywhere. Hospitality, got to now stay here. Hospitality also is not what we call quid pro quo. It is not about inviting people over so that we later get invited over to their house, right? We have the example in Luke 14 and verse 12. Let's actually turn there. This one we'll turn to Luke 14 and verse 12, another example of our Savior Jesus Christ. Luke 14 and verse 12. Okay. It says, he also said to him who invited him, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers or your relatives, nor your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. Now, is this saying we can never have a meal with our neighbors and our family and stuff? That's not the point. Verse 13, but when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. Have you ever heard someone say, I invite people over all the time, and I never get invited anywhere? And I understand that can hurt. We all hurt, because we want to be liked also, and we have, things that we want to be invited over to someone's house. But in a way, I was thinking, this is good. You're inviting people over. You're doing this, and you're not doing it because someone's inviting you back over later and you've been invited. You're doing it because you're being hospitable. God sees that. God knows that. That's good. Let's go to at the beginning of the sermon, I said that the first word we use, philosenos, it's found 3 places. We talked about how it's in the list in Timothy and Titus. Let's go to the third. It's in 1 Peter 4 and verse 9. First Peter 4:9. And again, there's an extra layer here that Peter adds to this topic. So we've heard from Paul a lot. Now Peter's also bringing this word out. Philissenos, same one we started with. 1 Peter 4:9 simply says, be hospitable to one another, yet he adds, without grumbling. Now this word grumbling means to murmur. It means to have secret displeasure. And as I thought about, well, why would somebody be hospitable and then grumble about it? And then I started back thinking through various scenarios and various times in our lives and or others people's lives. And I think sometimes you can do something initially with a pure and right heart. You want to invite someone over. Sometimes we give more than we honestly have to give. Anybody ever given more than you honestly had to give? And at the end of that, maybe we feel a little disgruntled about how much we gave, and maybe we didn't feel appreciated enough for how much we gave. Maybe we didn't feel like others did their parts. It can be for a number of different reasons, but at the end of the day, sometimes we can feel kind of put upon for the hospitality that we chose to give. So it is important that we give only what we can give with a good heart and in a heartfelt way. You'll remember the story of Mary and Martha that's found in Luke 10 and verse 38. We won't turn there, but you'll remember Martha comes out and she's upset with her sister that her sister's not doing her part in this service that they're doing. And Martha was not able to do that cheerfully. And you can imagine, and I think of the Martha and Mary probably as teenage girls at this time, because we know that likely the disciples were young. Martha probably went back grumbling a little bit about her sister Mary and what she wasn't doing, and finally had enough and went out and said, Christ, make her help me. I'm doing all this work. She's not helping. Bitterness was setting up there. We need to all know our limits, and we need to sometimes also adjust our perspective. Remember why you're doing it, that it's good. It's about building relationships. Yeah, maybe you had to do some more dishes that night. Maybe there's some extra cleanup involved, but it's worth it. Why also might we struggle with hospitality? For some of us, hospitality is outside our comfort zones. Some of us consider ourselves shy. Some of us consider ourselves introverts, and it does not come easy for us to put ourselves out there and say, okay, I would like to invite you to my home where I'm going to feel this pressure now that I've got to keep conversation going with this person I don't know well, and have this food and this time together. And for many people, this does not come natural. In a lot of these areas where we start to see why hospitality can be difficult for us, I would like you to start to try to, instead of saying, well, it's hard, or these fit me, saying, okay, how am I going to overcome it? Because it's a quality we have to have. So yes, there could be reasons it's difficult for you, but it is still something God expects of you. Therefore, we have to figure out how to work within it. So if you are shy and you're an introvert and having conversation with somebody doesn't come easy, what could you do? And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but you could invite somebody that you know is really good at talking to other people to come along also, right? Now, so instead of just being a couple people, now you got 3 or 4 people, but one of those people can keep a conversation going all by themselves, right? You bring that person along, you might not have to say anything all night, but you're going to learn a lot about the person, and you're going to have a good time. And you could do that. And you could go to them and be like, hey, I would like to invite so-and-so over, but I'm feeling a little nervous about it. Would you mind coming and hosting with me? And I'm sure most people would sign up for that and be very happy to do that. Why else can we struggle with it? Distance, right? Sometimes we can struggle here, especially in the Bay Area, with the distance it takes to get together with other people. In Cincinnati, this wasn't as big of a problem. Most of the brethren lived within about 30 minutes of each other. So here, hardly anybody lives within 30 minutes of each other, it seems. And so getting together is harder here. And sometimes I know I have found myself going, they're not going to want to come all the way up to our house. And I'm not invited someone because I was afraid that the distance might be too hard for them. Well, that's silly. First of all, I didn't even do it and get the answer. But what I've also learned since being here is people do drive a lot. People are willing to come. And I've been surprised at that. Somebody drives an hour and 15 minutes to get up to a place or to have a meeting or whatever it might be. And so, first of all, one of the lessons I'm learning is don't put that limit on somebody. Ask them. They can say no, but, ask them. Also, we can get creative again with it. Sometimes, since we're already here at church, if there's some planning involved, sometimes we can invite somebody already coming from here, which shortens maybe a distance in some cases. Maybe it doesn't always, but anyway, distance can be a problem, but it's something that we're going to have to, I think, learn to solve, especially as the end time approaches. Getting together less isn't really an option. We need to be getting together more, encouraging each other more. And as, again, days get worse and the times get closer, I think we need to be together more and more often all the time. It's under this topic of distance that I also mentioned something else. Maybe a month ago, a few weeks ago, I asked everybody who was planning to host for Night to Be to go ahead and let me know. Like, if you're planning to host, let me know. And one of the things that was interesting to me, this is only my second year being here, but it's basically the exact same list as last year's hosts. And I really appreciate that those people are hosting. That's wonderful. But what I'm also understanding is there's kind of regions here because of the distances. And those nights tend to go long. And we had Passover the night before. Those nights go long. We got a holy day next day. People tend to stay kind of within their regions. Well, I've asked all the people who are hosting this year to shake it up just a little bit. It's not that you can't have any overlap on who you invite over. But I would like each year that we host, and if ends up being the same people to host each year, which I hope it isn't, I hope that all of us over time will take times hosting, because I think that's good for all of us to develop that quality and to do that. And it's also nice for the person who always hosts to occasionally get an invite somewhere else and not host. So there's lots of reasons for this. But also, in order for us to mix up our groups and not to just be in a place where, I know these people well because I've gone to their house 7 years in a row. Well, no, I've been invited over to this person's house, and frankly, I don't know them that well. And so this is going to be really nice. They're going to be able to hear about how I came into church. I'm going to be able to ask them how they came into church. And at the end of the night, I'm going to know them in a new and special way that I've never known them before. And Night to Be is just one of the many nights that's kind of already a good day for doing that, getting to know our brethren better. We have that meal already, scheduled. But I've asked all the hosts to shake it up a bit. And I mentioned that today in this sermon for this reason also. If you got invited the last 7 years over to someone's house and this year you don't get that same invite, don't think you messed up last year and goofed up when they invited you over to their house. You used the wrong fork at the wrong time, or, whatever it might have been. You didn't do anything wrong. They're simply doing what I've asked and trying to invite some different people into their home this year. And you're going to have to find somewhere new to go if you've gone to the same place 7 years in a row. No, anyway, there is going to be some overlap, and there's some of that, and that's fine. And there are going to be circumstances where, because of abilities to drive at night or whatever it might be, that's not possible for someone to go other places. I'm not trying to make this hard on anyone, but I am trying to get us to continually grow closer as a body. I think that's important to all of you. And it's certainly important to me that we all continue to build these relationships with one another in a really close and special way. The other thing, and I mentioned this already just briefly, is that it's good for the person who always hosts to also have to be hosted. And this is something that has over the years come to my knowledge, is sometimes some of us are really good at serving, but we also have to learn to be served. It's interesting to me at the foot washing service that we both have to wash a foot and wash feet and have our feet washed, right? I imagine if I asked for a show of hands right now, most people would say it's much easier for me to get down on my knees and wash somebody else's feet than to sit there and have them wash my feet. I think it's much more easy for us to give service to someone else than to sit there and have to be served by someone else. Now, maybe that's not universally true, but I bet it's highly true for the majority of people here. And I think that can go beyond, obviously, foot washing. If you're a servant and it's who you've been for decades in the church, you probably much rather be the one serving than having anybody have to come in and do something in your life for you. And I learned that for the first time after I had back surgery a number of years ago. And the first time men were out there mowing my grass, it hurt my pride. Because I go mow people's grass. People don't come mow my grass. But I had to learn how to say, yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you. And to say, thank you. And we learn different things in each of those roles. And so if you're the one who always hosts, maybe next year you take a year off. And I don't need everybody to take next year off. But maybe you take next year off and you let somebody invite you over and you say, yeah, that would be really nice. Thank you. I'd like to do that. All right. I think that's what I wanted to kind of say there. Another thing that can be a problem for us or hinder our hospitality can be our age. And that's true. As we get older, we get tired sooner. Sometimes we can't see at night. There's things that can be impacted there. And again, sometimes we're going to have to think out of the box and get creative. I would encourage everyone that if you get in it, like easily tired, you don't have the energy to do a meal for, a bunch of people, that's okay. Could you say, hey, let's just have pie and ice cream. You bring a pie, I'll get the ice cream. I'll make a pot of coffee. That's pretty simple. We're going to have pie, ice cream, and coffee. That's it. Great. I know to grab a burger on my way there, and we're going to have pie and ice cream and coffee, and that's great. It's that's all it has to be. I guess what I'm trying to encourage, in these silly examples is just to say it doesn't have to be complicated. Don't let some excuse be the reason you don't get together with the brethren. And everybody loves dessert. So that's easy. Another excuse, and I'm calling it an excuse, is you hear somebody say, my house is too small, or my house isn't very nice, or it's pretty cluttered, or whatever the excuse may be, and they may let that hold them back from ever developing this quality of hospitality. And why does that bother us? Because none of us want to feel that we're not good enough. We all fear being rejected or hurt some way. And so that insecurity impacts whether we're willing to put ourselves out there. I'm going to encourage you to get over that. 22 years ago or so, when Cindy and I were first married, we lived about 2 hours east of Cincinnati, where I was in school in what's called Appalachian, Ohio. It is it's I think the poorest area of Ohio. These people don't have a lot. It's kind of, the backcountry there, a poor part of the state. But there was this great family in our very small congregation that we went to, and they didn't have much, but they invited us over to their house. We went, we sat in their very small trailer, and it was awesome. We grew closer with that family in a way that we were different. Our relationship was different after that. We loved them in a different way, a different level, and we still love them to this day. But I remember that 22 years later, not because I can't tell you what we ate. I remember there was some sort of food. I have no idea what it was. I can't tell you what was in their house or not. But all I remember is they invited us into their home, and we had a great evening. And the relationship was built. I don't know if they felt self-conscious about their place, but they didn't let whatever they had or didn't have hindered them from having us over. And had they, we would not have developed the relationship, because eventually we moved from there. That was the only time that I remember anyway getting together with them, and the relationship would have never gotten to that level if they had let what they might not have hindered them from having us over. Again, I've sat in people's driveways in folding chairs, for hours, and that's great. And again, you could have a picnic outside. As I was writing this this morning, this thought came into my head about I used to watch The Simpsons. I know back in the early days of The Simpsons, that was kind of a no-no in the church. The Simpsons was terrible. Now you watch it and you go, compared to society now, maybe it wasn't as bad as it's getting now. But anyway, point is, it had Bart Simpson and it had the dad Homer. Well, Homer decided to run for like city council or something. I don't remember exactly the nuance. And he ran it on the slogan of, "Can't someone else do it?" And everybody was like, "Yeah, can't somebody else do it? Like, I don't want to do this. Can't somebody else?" And like, it got this big following and he was doing great under this idea until nobody got anything done because it was under the idea of, can't somebody else do it? Well, I was thinking about that this morning because within hospitality, we can slip into the mindset of, somebody else will do it. Can't somebody else do it? There are always going to be people in our congregation that we already know are super hospitable. They're the ones that have people over. I don't need to do it. They're going to do it. We can slip into the mindset of, can't somebody else do it? And come to rely on these people. And that's good for them. They develop the quality that we're talking about today. But for us, who still need to develop that quality. And when I say us, I'm not talking about your wife, because if your wife is hospitable and you're not qualified to be an elder. That's what it says, right? You have to develop this quality. Your kids could have the quality and you couldn't have the quality. Well, good for them, but you need it. So all of us need this quality. It's not good enough that your wife is hospitable. We all have to be hospitable. And again, not neglect it, not let it slip from our minds, not just assume somebody else will get to it. There is nothing like talking to people in their homes. I think all of us would intuitively know when we come together today for church, we can talk to people and we love that. We love fellowship. But how many of us feel like we walk away at the end of a church service like with some deep, super close relationship with somebody new? Probably not. You may say, "How was your week?" You may even share some nugget of what you're going through or something and get a little bit deeper into that relationship. But the likelihood is you are not developing deep relationships here at church service. But you have somebody into your home or you go to somebody else's home, you walk away from that time completely transformed in that relationship. There is nobody I have visited that I didn't leave their house loving them multiple times more than I did before I walked into the home. Because now I know about their upbringing. I know how they came into the church. I know the challenges they faced. And I've shared part of my life with them too. And our relationship is now on a completely different level than it was before. But I could have seen them for the next 5 years at church and never gotten to that level with them. I would love them because we go to church together and that's great. But until you've spent time in someone's home or in their home, you just can't develop those same relationships. Certainly money can be a challenge. We all understand we have limited resources sometimes. Again, get simple and get creative. Somebody can bring something. It doesn't have to involve much. Again, you can use paper plates and paper cups if the work of cleaning up afterwards too much. Again, I just want to drive home. As we get closer to the end times, nothing's going to get easier. It's not like all of a sudden we're going to be rolling in the money. We're not going to be rolling in the time. It's not like all of a sudden we're going to feel younger. No, like these problems that we're talking about here are probably only going to be more than they are today. So if we're waiting for some time later, it's going to be harder than it is right now. So we need to start practicing that right now. Whatever challenge you may identify with that we've talked about today, whether it's being, shy or, not having a very nice home, take it to God, pray about it, ask God to help you to find a way around the challenge, around the hurdle, think outside the box, get other people involved, whatever it may be. Pray that you have enough faith to trust that person with whatever you have or don't have, that everything doesn't have to be perfect in order to have somebody into your space. The fact is, I know for sure that there are many in the congregation that we don't know well. Some people you know really, really well. But others, I guarantee there's people in this room right now and online and in each congregation that you only know so well. I would encourage you to think about some of those people and identify who it is you can continue to grow a relationship with. That you would maybe, Cindy and I in our last congregation, I remember we put out this goal of having every single person from the congregation into our house, and we never got close. But we did have some people into our house that we wouldn't have had in our house without a goal of trying to have everybody into our house. And so, it's important to have a goal of getting to know the family. There shouldn't be strangers in our congregation. But when we really think like, who do I know well? Who really knows me, knows my story? Who do I know their story, know their kids, about their kids at least, even if I don't know their kids, but I know about their kids. I've learned about spouses that died years ago through going, over to somebody's house. I see the picture on the wall. Who's this? Oh, that's my husband. Oh, yeah, of course you probably were married, at some point or, whatever it might be. But until you've sat in someone's home, there's these things that we just don't know. Now, you might think, I have no idea what to talk to somebody about. I invite them over. What do I say? That's outside my comfort zone. I'll give you just 2 things to ask. Where did you grow up? And how did you come into the church? You ask those 2 questions and keep, kind of just following along with where that goes. You'll spend 2 hours talking about those things. Every visit I go on, that's basically the 2 questions I ask. Where did you grow up and how did you come into the church? And 2 hours later, I'm having to say, I got another visit I have to go to or whatever. But it's not for a lack of time. We could keep talking another 4 hours. I was thinking about a couple of examples and how hospitality transforms relationships this morning. One, I'll give these 2 examples and then we'll wrap up here. One was a family in St. Louis. My wife knew the husband from when they were kids. Their families were friends, but we didn't really know them that well, and I didn't know them at all. And we had a couple of young kids. We used to almost always have to go to St. Louis on the way to somewhere, whether it was to visit, Ed and Ray and Dowd in Kansas or Oklahoma when they lived there. It just seemed like we were always passing through St. Louis. Well, one time they got wind that we were coming through, and they offered to host us and put us up. Well, I was like, oh, we're not even getting in till like 10 o'clock at night, and we got to be on the road at 7 in the morning. They're like, we don't care. You can use us as a hotel. We don't care. Oh, we got there at 10 and we stayed up to 1 o'clock in the morning talking. And, anyway, but we started staying at that family's home almost every time I think we went through St. Louis after that. And over years, they became some of my closest friends in the church. But it was because they heard we were coming through and offered to put us up as a hotel, overnight. And that's all it takes. There was another couple that lived 2 hours east of Cincinnati, attended the Portsmouth, Ohio congregation. And they invited Cindy and I and the 2 girls out for one Friday night, and we would go with them to church in Portsmouth the next day. And they had us out. Again, I can't tell you what we ate. I remember where we slept and in the house and as we stayed overnight and different things. But what I didn't know at that time, and this is a family, that family knew my family and there were family connections. And, I'd seen them at church a whole bunch of times, but I didn't really know them. I don't even know how long it was, but it was within months. Within months, the husband was cutting a tree. And a stupid tree fell and killed him. Had we not gone over there, first of all, that would have been the only opportunity I had to get to know him at that level. So that opportunity had been missed. Wouldn't have been able to be there for the widow when she went through losing her husband. That's just a reality though, right? You don't you don't take those opportunities, they're gone. You only get so many of those. They could have easily said, we'll get them over eventually. We'll have the Phelpses over, at some point in the future. And then, the accident could have happened and that day never comes. I no longer wonder why hospitality is listed in the lists. For why an elder has to have this quality, why a widow has to be able to do this if she, church assistants. Hospitality is the vehicle by which God builds closer relationships within the family of God. Fellowship at church just doesn't do it. It's getting in each other's homes. It's having a meal together. It's sharing each other together. So if I don't develop this quality, I don't have the relationships with you all that I want to have. God did not call you at this time, or God, I guess I should say, God didn't have to call you at this time. Could have waited. He could have waited till the second resurrection and let you know his truth at that time. You could have just stayed in blindness. But he did. He called each and every one of us by design, by purpose, to prepare us for a time where we're going to get to serve in his great family. First of all, at the millennium, when people come limping into that time frame after the terrible things that are going to happen upon the earth at that time, and we're going to need to be able to serve a bunch of strangers and be friendly toward them and love them. And then there's going to be another time at the second resurrection when God's going to bring every person who has ever lived to life, and we're going to have a bunch of new strangers that we're going to have to work with and get to know and be there for. We have to be developing that ability to love and be friendly towards strangers now. God called you for that purpose now, to be developing and growing in this characteristic. That's why I think it's in these lists. We have to have this, because if we're going to use it later, we've got to be developing it now. And God gives us a great place to work on it and practice it right here among safe people who we know care about us, who don't care about our house. They don't care about what we have or how good the meal is. They care about us and they want to get to know us. So, I've been issuing challenges lately at some of the ends of my sermon. Well, surprise, there's a challenge here. Would like you to find someone that you do not know in the congregation. Well, even if you know them, but you don't know them well. Someone you don't feel a close connection with already, who you don't know their conversion story. Pick someone and invite them into your space. Doesn't have to be today. I know you probably don't have the crock pot going with the food at home right now, but find a time and make a plan. And if you're shy, invite somebody that's not shy to come along with you. That you already know well, so you only have one new stranger to have to meet maybe, or something like that. But the point is, make a plan, think outside the box, find a way. I would encourage you not to have a lot of people. Don't make it a big group, because while I love lots of people, I love the Super Bowl parties when you have lots of people come over and that type of thing, but you don't get to know people well in that kind of setting. Small groups is when you get to know people. So have a small group, handful of people, or even just one-on-one. That's the challenge, and that's today's sermon.